So welcome everybody. My name is Antonis Asprikis. I'm the Executive Assistant to Dean DeCarolis here in the Charles D. Close School of Entrepreneurship. And I'm also a former president of the Drexel Faculty and Staff LGBTQA+ group. It is my honor today to serve as the event coordinator for our Diverse Entrepreneurs in Action series. Today's guest speaker is Dr. Kimberly McGlonn. Dr. Kimberly McGlonn is an advocate for justice and environmentalism, advocacy that informs her approach to leadership in the fashion industry. As founder and CEO of the manufacturing startup Grant BLVD, she oversees the creative direction and growth strategy of Brand. Ultimately, Grant BLVD's mission is to construct stylish, sustainably sourced fashion by reducing waste to landfills and by creating living wage jobs for women. Outside of these roles, Kimberly disrupts by guiding other social entrepreneurs in discovering their purpose via her digital community, Build It Boldly. Her work has been featured by Fast Company, Inc. magazine, and Shondaland. And it is my honor to also introduce Dean DeCarolis, founding dean of the Charles D. Close School of Entrepreneurship, who will be interviewing Dr. McGlonn today. So with no further ado, before I finish up, I just want to thank my colleague, Melissa Tavir, who's helping in the background today, helping me get the logistics together for the event. Thank you so much. I'm very grateful for your help. And I'm very grateful to all of you for joining us today. Dean DeCarolis, if you'd like to take it from here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Antonis. And I want to thank Antonis for being the Close Schools official representative and leader in our DEI initiative here at the Close School. And thank you for putting this together, and looking forward to our next event, which we'll be announcing shortly. So I'd like to get started. Kimberly, I don't see you on the Zoom. Oh, there you go. Okay. Okay. So welcome and thank you for sharing this time with us. We know how busy you are. What I wanted to ask was, the first question is, this Grant BLVD is a sustainable clothing store with an emphasis on reducing recidivism, such a critical cause. What was the driving force that made you, first of all, join these two causes and join them to have them manifest, right, in a retail organization, a for-profit retail organization?
I'm so happy to be here with y'all today and to share, just like the things I've learned in this journey and figuring out exactly what you asked about, Donna, this idea of how do we think with a higher degree of kind of intersectionality and tenderness about what are the things that are these larger struggles for our country and our planet. And so, Grant BLVD was really just, which I think is the genesis of such incredible things in the history of mankind. It was me really kind of becoming aware, and then deciding that because of my awareness that maybe that was the sign, that the lighthouse that I needed is towards what direction I would move in, right? So for me, there's like all these small stories in the totality of my life, growing up in the north side of Milwaukee and having a mom who was a home sewist and who went into prisons on weekends to support women who were currently incarcerated. And my father was an entrepreneur. He opened a delicatessen in a neighborhood, MLK Drive, same as MLK is in most places across the country, deeply impoverished neighborhoods. He opened a restaurant thinking of how to create fresher food options. And so, I had this like longer backdrop of my story of just like the things I observed as a kid. And then they really, I think, came into a lot fuller color when in 2016, I saw for the first time Ava DuVernay's documentary 13th. I don't know if anyone in the room has seen 13th. It's on Netflix. And I really think that, if we're really going to think about what is the state of our democracy, what's the history of our democracy, what's the future of our democracy, watching 13th is a great primer for giving some context. So, and I'm going to link this to Grant BLVD. So 13th is a deconstruction of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, which, we know it as the Emancipation Proclamation, where Lincoln did something that was really courageous and incredibly strategic. He brought together a deal. We talk about business, right? He sealed the deal of government to say, we're going to preserve this union. And in order to do that, I recognize we're going to have to make some sacrifices. And the sacrifice that he made was he allowed for, in the clause of the 13th Amendment, there to be explicit language that said if someone breaks the law, that they can be captured and used for least labor. So putting in that caveat, it appeased places which immediately took advantage to exploit it, where they instituted all of these laws. You know, you can't be out after a certain time if you're Black, you can't be unemployed, you can't be caught reading, you can't be caught, you know, dressing a certain way, you can't be caught using, you know, speaking with this kind of volume or this kind of tonality. And it ended up setting up our current criminal system. So I saw that documentary in 2016. I started thinking about the horror of that, quite frankly. Like I found it horrendous that this would be the case of the situation. And so I started thinking about who are incarcerated. You know, what of them? 96% of them come home to us. What of them? And I don't have I've checked a lot of my biases around criminality. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, those of us who are gathered here together, most of us have at some point broken the law. We may not have been caught, we might not have been arrested, we might have been charged or convicted, but we've done something that was that broke the law. And I thought, you know, what happens to those people? And so I thought maybe I could find a place to create jobs, a pathway to create community. And I thought about, what did I love? What outside of teaching? At that point, I was a classroom teaching. What could I do that could create some space? I thought about my closet. I thought about stories. I was an English major. I thought about textiles and time travel, which is what my closet lets me do. And I thought maybe fashion might be the lane. And so I started asking people that I knew, like, you know, like you all know me as a teacher, but I kind of have this idea that maybe I can create jobs for people who are, you know, disenfranchised in this way by, you know, maybe doing it in a way that's not creating damage in this way. And you know, in 2017, which is when I launched Grant Boulevard, those people were like, you're doing a lot, like you're really doing a lot. And it is a lot. But I think when I think about the future of business design, you know, the things I hope we as citizens of this planet get most excited about are businesses that are really being really mindful about how they're responding and how they're showing up and what their impact is and how they're creating inclusive community. And so it still excites me to think that that's what we're experimenting with, despite all the challenges, which I'm hopefully maybe at some point I think we're going to talk about.
That's great. Quick follow-up question, right? So clearly the passion for sustainability, solving this tremendous social problem, recidivism, people coming out of the prison, how do we, you know, they come out and there's no network, there's no support, and they end up going back, and it's just a cycle. But I'm going to ask you a business question. You know, I get the social causes, but what experience did you have? I'm looking our students here, right, in retail, to choose retail. You know, sometimes we suggest to students that, you know, you should get into an industry or a market where you do have some experience. Did you have experience in retail? How did that piece come together?
It's you know, I worked at Blockbuster when I was 18, and I worked at a couple of Blockbuster locations. So you guys can guess how old I am. I worked in the mall at the Body Shop. So I had been on the retail side as a teen and as an undergrad, but really, you know, I didn't have explicit retail experience. What I had, though, which I think some of you who are thinking about this from the lane of student or, you know, burgeoning entrepreneur, what I did have was I had real insight into who I knew. And I think that one of the, I never presumed, Donna, that I needed to know how to do everything. I presumed that I had to be able to identify talent and then convince talent that what I was building was worthy of their arrival and worthy of that talent. And so, you know, we're none of us as business owners can know all the things. You know, I think of myself as a conductor, you know, where it's like, I went to the symphony for the first time in many years, and I saw it in a totally new light. You know, I think when I went to the symphony as a, you know, different chapters of my life, I looked at the conductor and I thought, wow, this person doesn't really do anything. They're just doing this, you know, like they're just standing up there and they're just doing this. And when I looked at it from a different altitude, I realized that the magic of the conductor knows not only the entire movement, he knows every measure for every instrument that's showing up in that space to keep them in unison, right? To make music. As CEO, I never thought I needed to learn. I mean, I took a sewing class because I was like, I need to be able to communicate with my stitchers, with my sewists, but I didn't need to master sewing. You know, I took classes in marketing, took classes in PR, and then I used what I learned, what I gleaned to build remarkable teams. And when I think about, you know, the totality of all the things we're tackling, it's not because of my retail experience. It's because I brought people onto my team that know far more than I do about things that I'm not even really interested in knowing in depth. And I trust them. I empower them.
I hear you. I have a great team and I empower them all the time because I certainly don't know everything. You know, your story sounds remarkably similar. I don't know if you know Hip City Veg.
Oh, yeah.
And Nicole Marquis, who is not a chef, right? But her passion is plant-based food. And she started out, it's very similar, right?
Yeah.
So you start Grant Boulevard, and then lo and behold, pandemic. How did you navigate that?
Lo and behold, and you know, and and we're still navigating it, right? So, you know, I think we secured our first storefront in February of 2020, and the intention, well, like, you know, like, yeah, big first week of February 2020, and then the intention was we were gonna give ourselves about 6 weeks to get the location ready for you know, for our community, for our customers. And then, you know, the shutdown happened. We had met all of our production goals. We had, you know, we'd spent so much time thinking about how we were approaching design, what our textile strategy would be. And we were like, what do we do? And at that point, Mayor Kinney had decided that it was like a don't leave your house kind of moment. And so we really had a lot of stress about like basically sneaking out of our houses and meeting at the storefront. And what we decided to do was I brought my daughter, who was 12, and I brought my director of design, and she brought her iPhone because our models for the shoot that we had planned for that collection had fled. You know, everybody was in like, you know, hunker down mode. And my daughter, who's actually still remains one of my favorite stylists, she styles me all the time. She did the styling, and Nevada Gray, who's our director of design, she did the photography on her iPhone. And we launched that collection with me as a model, and then local models who we dropped off, you know, bags of garments to. And we sold that collection out. We maybe sold it out to like we had 10 pieces left. Like, it was remarkable how those things left in the pandemic. But the other thing we decided to do was, once we shot that and we got, you know, we got the collection launched, the next thing that we had to decide was, what are we doing with this storefront? Like, where we have overhead that we're now responsible for. And we waited until I got the sense that urban, you know, like other brands were opening their doors. And I was like, if the big brands are opening their doors, then we're open for business. You know, like if it's either we're going to let it go and we're just going to put a kibosh on the whole thing, or we're going to take a temperature check and we're going to push. And so we made the decision that we were going to push, and it worked out because, you know, the location that we secured was really unconventional. And I love the unconventional nature of it. It was an old, dusty car garage, but it had a full car garage front. So in a moment where people were really, and understandably so, incredibly anxious about being in shared space, we could offer a retail experience that was an inside out. And so there was something really serendipitous about the choice to pull that, you know, to choose that pathway in terms of our retail experience, and that it really was really a great one for us in the end, when the world was really feeling really unsafe.
So you went ahead and opened up perhaps a little earlier than.
We waited until July, you know, so we opened up in early July. We waited a couple of months. You know, the anxiety was still so high that, and, you know, it's so interesting, even trying to think about getting people to shop in a moment when the whole world, it almost felt like I was constantly thinking like, you know, how do we judge consumer psychology, you know, when so many of us are traumatized, like, or just confused, you know? And so that was one of the things that we had to be thinking about, is what's the strategy going to be given the temperature check on what's happening in the world? You know, what's the story we're going to tell about what we're offering and why it's important? How are we going to make this retail experience feel safe? And we also thought about, you know, how are we going to still tend to community, which is such a big part of our brand mission. So for us, we actually pivoted very early. April the 1st, we pivoted to making masks. And we really folded this idea of offering masks to people with the opportunity to support Philadelphia's homeless community. So we did a buy one, give one to Project Home, who's the largest kind of provider of support services for Philadelphia's homeless community. So we were just like, let's go. And we made a lot of masks.
Wow. How many employees do you have?
We have 9.
And was it a problem for your employees to come back during that time, or
no? We actually, not only was it not a problem, I mean, if you go to our About Us page, and if you guys haven't checked out Grant Boulevard, I welcome you to just kind of get a sense of how we tell stories, from our blog posts to our visuals. On our About Us page, there's a video, this really a beautifully done video that just introduces you to us. And I think what that video captured, which it was very unscripted, like I interviewed them directly, but it wasn't like, there was no scripting about what they would say. And people who come to work with us, they come because they love what we stand for and the sense of shared values, inclusive community, and they stay for the same thing. So I do think that, in the pandemic, when there was so much stress and uncertainty and so much like a growing awareness of work culture, there's this great resignation, right? That the business community is struggling with. For us, our team really felt like they were a part of something that was nutritious. And so, not only did we not lose people, we gained people. When Broadway closed, there was talent in Philadelphia that were incredibly richly talented sewists who were looking for employment. And so we got to pick up some of that talent. So in some interesting ways, it was, I feel like our work culture made us in really some important ways an anchor for folks who were feeling untethered.
Thank you. Could we pivot a little bit? Can you share with us your experience as a Black entrepreneur? Has that any different than you think anyone else? Has it shaped your experience with the particular challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I appreciate the candor of it. And I'm going to meet it with a candid answer.
Sure.
I think that for me, having an intersectional identity, right? Identifying as Black, identifying as woman, identifying as queer, the intersections of that have always given me some interesting distance from what I think are maybe perhaps heteronormative, cisgender, white culture. And I say that because when I think about businesses in Philadelphia in particular, and y'all may know this, those of you who are students, Blacks make up 40% of the residents of Philadelphia, but less than 3% of business owners. So there's a significant gap there. And I think what that gap also creates is, sometimes, just because of the outsider nature of our experience, we're not able as easily to navigate the labyrinth that business ownership is and how to figure out which levers to pull and how to move quickly. Some people, they inherit business or they inherit the language of business from what they've heard. And for me, that wasn't my experience for a plethora of reasons. I think that being Black has created an awareness of that always, right? But it's also been like one of the things that I know definitively gives my company its sauce. The way in which we tell stories is tied to my cultural identity. It's tied to my racial memory, my racialized memory. And so, it's something that I'm aware of, but it never really feels like something it's like a burden for me per se. I recognize that we have less access to capital. VC capital goes 98% to white men, 2% goes to women, fewer than that goes to Black women. So I know the math. Then it just becomes like, how am I navigating all this context where very few people like me happen to, be within the conversational spaces? And how do I use my presence there to do what we're doing right now, which is to shed some light?
I see. There's one of my colleagues at Drexel has done some research, and I wish I could remember. I remember this number, that there are 3,500 solo Black entrepreneurs in the city. And I can't remember the number, but it's an extremely small percentage of them that are even able to hire employees.
That's a fact.
That's a fact. So it's very interesting that there is this entrepreneurial spirit, and people are, doing businesses wherever they can do it, but they're not able to scale. They're not able to hire employees. And it's a tremendous loss of talent, loss of innovation.
It is.
Loss of opportunity.
It is. And I think that this is a struggle, right? Is that, building a business requires capital. And if you don't have the ease of capital into like the VC spaces, if that's what you choose, right? Or if you don't have the contact at the community finance group, should you be that way? Or if you want to do a crowd fund and your network are not high net worth individuals, you're at a loss just in terms of securing working capital. And that is something that, we have to figure out, right? Those of us who are thinking about the future of business ownership, how are we going to be able to level the playing field by recognizing that those are real barriers?
Exactly, exactly. So it was very interesting what you said about the intersection of sexuality, you know, Black and women, right? And so I'm gonna I went off of our questions because I'm going to ask this. In any way, did that give you any sort of, as opposed to a challenge, any kind of opportunity? Like how did you turn that into something successful?
Yeah, no, I think that all of us, once we own our identities, what it does is it gives you a sense of self-possession. You know, like I can tell my story, all of it, without a sense of, sometimes there isn't shame. Sometimes there's pride, sometimes there's neutrality. It's just like statement of fact, right? Because I own my identities and their evolution. I should also say that, like, I give myself permission to allow my evolution, my identities to evolve. But I think the beauty of that is, one of the things that's allowed me to do is that I have been a lot of people. Like I've spent quality time with lots of people. I've learned the languages of different communities. And that is another superpower I think that entrepreneurs have to cultivate, is how do you learn how to talk? And this is for whether you're coming at it from an entrepreneurial lens right now, or you're thinking about how you're going to develop an entrepreneurial spirit. What that requires is a multilingual kind of attitude. And that encourages, like, language is partly culture, it's body language. How do you show up in different communities with ease? And so having those identities, owning those identities, Donna, I can roll up in a lot of different rooms. And you know, like, it's not like I'm not moving too far from my center. The core of my constitution is the same. It's like, you know, I just have these other things I can just kind of, you know, I throw it in when I need to throw it in. And it's supernatural because it's all true. Like, I do know what it's like to be queer, and I do know what it's like to be Black, and to be a woman, and to be poor, and to be, you know, to be a member of academia, and to be a teacher. And I own it all. I own it all. And I think that when we give ourselves permission to own all of our identities, it makes for more, it just gives us more ease in life, and it makes us stronger leaders, right? It allows us to lead more boldly, which is what consumers are looking for. That they're looking for bold leadership.
So you've just set this up for me beautifully. So, you know, here in the close school, as you know, we're very much about teaching about an entrepreneurial character and mindset. And a lot of that is wrapped up in resilience, creativity, initiative, self-confidence. You know, we have a course that we call mindfulness and well-being. How do you stay mindful, you know, in life? And so some of the pushback that I get, that all of us that from the close school get, is, you know, you can't teach someone those things, which I believe I don't think that's true. I think that, you know, given experience, the way we do it in the close school, throwing you into starting something, putting you with like-minded individuals, exposing our students to individuals like you that say, hey, it's okay. Because as an entrepreneur, you need that confidence, right? And so some of the things that you elaborated on really are synergistic with, I think, what we're teaching here in the close school. So thank you so much for that. So Antonis, how much time do we have left before I want to open up for, I know our audience is dying to ask questions. So
This is so amazing. We have about 5 minutes left before the Q&A.
5 minutes. Let's see. So how did you create your team? You talked about your team. You talked about people that you knew that you brought onto your team. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Wow. I think building a team is really, a lot of it is about strategy, you know, and it is about mindset. You use that word mindset. You know, I think that when I look at what I think makes my team special, we are deeply diverse. And I think when we live in a moment where we're oftentimes only thinking about diversity along racialized lines. One of the things I think makes my team really, that I value in my team, is the age spread. You know, like I never look at someone and think that because you're 20 that you will have an evolved, you know, an evolved kind of landscape. I never look at someone and say, oh, you're 50, you're post career, there's nothing that you can offer. So I think that, you know, when you're thinking about building a team, and I use that term radical inclusion, it's like really figuring out, you know, what are the things, where do you see a gap in what you can't do? And then how do you fill the gaps? But that takes a lot of self-awareness. you have to know and really be able to accurately assess what you bring to the table so you can figure out what you're missing. And that takes a lot of humility. So, I think that that's the strategy, is like, my mindset is I am honest with myself about what I love. I'm honest with myself about what I don't like. And then I empower people, invite people who are like, I'm looking to shine. I'm looking to grow my skills. I know my own skill deficiencies. I identify my own strengths. I know the directional push where I want to go. And then you build from that. And one other thing I'll say, Don, is I always ask people in interviews, the first interview with me, regardless of where people are coming in on the team, it's always, values alignment. Like, I'm really intentional about preserving our culture, because that's the foundation of what keeps us united. But once we get past that and we're thinking about skills, I'm often interested in what people are most excited about, because I want to create space for people. And this is for those of you who are going to be thinking about hiring. I want to create space for people, for them to feel like they are able to grow into themselves, because because that means what you're doing, what I'm aspiring to create, is fertile soil. And so then my job as a leader is to give some sunshine, give some water, like that's my job, and give those opportunities, which is that water and that light. But really, it's how are we creating a culture where people are all feeling like we all are standing in some stable, fertile soil. And that's, for me, that's what it means to be, thinking about hiring and creating team. And
Kimberly, I'm sorry, are most of your employees recently released from prison?
No, right now, none of them are. And
Okay.
that's in part because of the pandemic. So we did a beta in 2019 of a makers cohort. And then, the pandemic happened and it stopped our ability to really kind of do what the intimacy of sewing is. But I'm super excited, and you guys will be among the first to hear that we're doing have a site visit planned on Monday with JEBS, which is a nonprofit in the city that does a lot of work for marginalization and marginalized communities in Philadelphia in a wide variety of ways. And we are working through the launch of a third space, which is a learning lab in Kensington. And so that will be dedicated exclusively to another cohort of formerly incarcerated women. Our ambition is to hire 80% of them, and to grow our B2B division, which is a new division of Grant Boulevard. I mean, we've done some beta of what that will look like, but this is going to be a new B2B, is like business to business, y'all. So we'll be moving into expanding our business to business revenue stream. And we're really excited to partner with JEBS and bringing that to life. So right now we have it's all women right now, and women is identified very broadly. We have women in our team who identify as trans, women identify as queer. It's all right now. We're very hard, very women centric, and that's not to the exclusion of men. It's just, who've pulled up and who've been qualified have just been women.
What's the name of the organization you're working with on Monday?
JEBS, JEVS, JEBS.
JEBS. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Thanks.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
Antonis, I'm following your lead here. I want to make sure that all the attendees have time to ask Kimberly questions. Are we at that time?
Absolutely. So we could use the hand raising function. If anybody's not familiar with it, you could also raise your hand like this on the screen, and I'll just call on people in the order that they appear on the screen. So I think we have a question from Nalan. Nalan, if you would just like to introduce yourself, just let us know a little bit about who you are, and then your question.
Hi everyone. I'm Nalin. I'm a second year sophomore studying at Close School. Thank you, Professor John, for giving me an opportunity to attend this event, at least being a pivot for me to get in here in this meeting. So it's really inspiring getting to know. I feel the biggest push here is to start a business by itself. Running it is the secondary part, but first, diving into the pool is the bigger deal here. And going in with proper resources is even harder. I myself have been working on a project right now, but getting the proper statistics and understanding how the business works is one thing, and the other thing is hiring a proper team, because I myself am not perfect here, and I believe in being the dumbest individual amongst my team, because at least that way I get to learn more from the team. The aura at least spreads. So I really want to know what was the criteria for you to choose your team? What strategies did you use, or what was the way to go forward for you?
It's really nice to meet you. Thanks for asking the question. So I think that, there hasn't been just one strategy. I think I will say this, in the very beginning, I invested in storytelling, right? So you're figuring out in the beginning how you're going to invest your money. I'm in retail, right? And so for us, we don't live unless our visuals sing a song. And so I invested in visuals. I needed someone who could get us to a place where we had a platform, a digital platform before, because remember I launched online, we launched a website, an online store before we moved into a physical space. So I really needed someone who could really help me navigate the of telling a beautiful visual story. And so that was what I invested in, right? So I did a crowd fund. I should back up. We talk about how we started in the very beginning. I did a crowd fund, tapped my, my neighbors, my friends, my family, my colleague, I asked everybody for money. Okay. And then what I did with that money was I invested in that person to help me tell the story that I needed to tell and get that website up. Then I had to figure out what my core was going to be, right? Like I knew I needed someone who would help me with design and production because I'm not a sewist. So I brought that person on board. And then we built out the next thing, which was like, okay, I need someone who can help me navigate, all these other little pieces of things. So think of it as like a gradual thing. Figure out who your number one pick is. You talked about being the dumbest person in the room, then you need to find your smartest person. So who is the person that needs to be the smartest in the room if you're the dumbest to start you off, right? Invest in that person. And there are two ways of making that investment. You can give them an hourly wage, right? Like if that's where you start, or you could give them a salary if that's what your capital allows for, or you can give them equity. So you figure out the formula for what you're able to give up, but you don't always have to give up, a salary right away. It could be that you say, okay, I'm gonna give you ownership. And that's how we're going to build this together. You're not helping me build this. We're building it together. So, those are a couple different pathways to, thinking about how you're going to, pull that off. I hope that was helpful.
Yes, it was. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. So we have Dean DeCarolis, followed by Jaya Tucker.
No,
So,
let Jaya go first.
Jaya, if you would like to introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, so nice to meet all of you guys. So nice to meet you. My name is Jaya Tucker. I'm actually an entertainment and arts management major at Drexel. And for my senior project, I actually started a nonprofit that's based off of like an event nonprofit. With those events, we bridge the gap for just the things that are lacking within Philadelphia. One event that we just did in the winter was bridging the gap between the young and the old. Through that, we had like different types of art, different types of talent. And through the arts is just where we find is the easiest way to kind of create unity, because art has its own language, and everybody can speak in the language of art, even if they're not an artist. And one of our main things, which I'm really excited about, is the merch line. It is sustainable. So I wanted to ask just a few questions, because it is a nonprofit. We do have like a lot of volunteers, which are like mainly our friends right now. And first being on the tip of perseverance, because we can't offer them like monetary like value right now. They're just kind of like, okay, like fueling on the mission and vision. And then also to like just the price point of the clothing and the merchandise, because we do want to make it accessible, but it is reworked sustainable clothing. So, and we're a nonprofit as well. So that would go back into funding the events and stuff like that. So yeah, that's my question.
I'm trying to figure out the question. Can you just one more time, throw just the question at me?
Yeah.
I got the context.
Absolutely. So the first question I had was, how do you guys persevere? And the second question I had was the price point of curating the sustainable stuff.
Got it. Thank you so much for that. So, perseverance is, I feel like it's like a wave, like I know what my due north is. And then when you think about building out your nonprofit, you just keep in mind in front of you what you're that end goal, right? Like this is what I'm building ultimately, and keep your chin up when you think about that, right? Like whenever you're feeling like, wow, I'm feeling overwhelmed, remember what your ultimate goal is and keep your chin up and focus on that, where that real due north for you is. And then, at the same time, make an effort every day to keep your chin down and to chip away a little bit at building at that thing. And, for me, even on the days when I feel like I'm overwhelmed, or I'm stretched a little thin, or I'm feeling a little fuzzy in terms of like, how are all these things coming together? Every night I go to bed and I know I did my best. And part of perseverance is reminding yourself, cheerleading yourself, nurturing yourself, that you're doing your best. And remember the wins. When I first started Grant Boulevard, I had a friend, went to Morehouse undergrad, then got his MBA from Wharton. He had just opened a a restaurant in University City. And he said, Kimberly, make sure you keep track of the wins, because the storming can get so tumultuous that you forget to see the wins. And then that's when you get discouraged. And the final thing I just want to tell you is, also keep in mind how you're measuring success. And that can change. This isn't like once you set these metrics for success, they stay the same forever. But have some sense of what is going to make you feel successful, so that you can keep recalibrating in that direction, because that's what's going to keep you fueled, right? That's what's going to keep you fueled on the days when you feel discouraged or overwhelmed or lonely or just sad. Like sometimes it won't even be the nonprofit that'll make you sad. It's just living and having those things out in front of you, what you're keeping your gaze on, will help you with the perseverance bit. In terms of pricing and there's a formula, right? Research formulas for cost of goods, and then you set your price according to what your cost of goods are and how much you want to make in terms of profit, right? And so you determine what is the profit that you need to make based on like, what are your fundraising goals? And then what your fundraising goal is, how much your cost of goods is. Well, that's how much you have to charge, right? I'm really excited about this idea of the nonprofit and the way it's thinking about intergenerational things. You can always, and this is for you, but it's also for everyone else. I'm gonna go ahead and throw my email in the chat. And if you would like to reach me and ask a question, with some more depth, and I will try to get back to you. It is my life is just so crazy. But I certainly want to be available where I can. So I'm going to put that out there. That's the best way to reach me. And then the other thing that I'm going to put out here is, in thinking about these questions that you're asking, I get these questions a lot, is about what is the strategy? How do I approach strategy? What's the language I need to even be thinking about strategy? And so I started thinking about how to offer what I've learned in this way, in a little bit more structured way. And so these are ways that you can also reach me if you're just like, I'm picking up what you're putting down, and I would like to pick up a little bit more there. I suspect there might be some more gems in there for me. That's another way to follow the trail of how I'm thinking about design and strategy and business development. Donna.
So I think you have a second career as a therapist, because I feel so much better after listening to you. But here's what I haven't heard from you. I haven't heard the F word, failure.
I was like, oh, are we going there?
Yeah, we're going right to failure. We're going to failure. One of our signature courses is Ready, Set, Fail, right? Mm-hmm. So I have not heard you say, I've heard you talk about getting your team together and trying different things and this and that. And I didn't hear anything about, well, it was a risk I took, or there was a chance of failure. Does failure ever come into your vocabulary, or how do you deal with, or I'm planning it this way, but it might not go this way, right? So could you address that?
Yeah, no. Yeah, I have thought a lot about failure. But what I think my relationship with failure is that, it has such a toxic connotation that it's almost unhelpful to figure out how to be in relationship with it. I do think it's a cultural kind of default that says that sometimes we fail. And for me, what I do all the time is I experiment every single day. As a business owner, I am experimenting. And when you look at good science, scientists don't come to the end of an experiment and say, I failed. They say, I learned. They say, that's what I did. I learned. And so, but when we build a construct that we're thinking about failure, that the binary is success and failure, that's not it. So even when I tell you, Jaya, to think about what makes you feel successful, I'm not encouraging you to juxtapose that what makes you feel like a failure. I'm saying, like, experiment in the direction of success, and know that sometimes the outcomes of your experimentation may not be what your hypothesis said that they would be. And that is a learning. And then it becomes, you set out again to create a new hypothesis. So, launching Build It Boldly, and it's reminding me, Build It Boldly is a new business venture for me. It's my second business venture. I'm in a fresh space of awareness of, like, what is the temperature check of what's working, what's not working? Where do we have to, pivot or, be nimble in a new way? That's what business ownership is. It's pivoting and being nimble and experimentation. And I think for me, thinking of it in terms of experimentation means I'm also thinking of it in terms of play. And that just feels like it's more manageable for me. If every day I was just like, if I perseverated on the word failure or the feeling of failure, which is the crippling thing, I wouldn't do anything. I would be overcome with like the fear of that notion of failing. So instead, my mindset is that I really try to think about it as, you know, I'm experimenting, and you're right. Sometimes I drop a garment and no one gives a crap, you know, like I pick a design, I pick a something, and I think it's going to be, it's like, it is just profound. And it's like, yeah, that was too deep. You're right. And so then it becomes like, okay, all right, I tried. And so, you know, I think we can liberate ourselves even in business if part of the idea is that it's an experiment and things are not always going to go the way that we anticipate. And you decide then, are you going to keep it pushing, or have you had enough? And having enough of something, it doesn't make me a failure. It means that I've come as far on that journey as I wanted to come, and I'm breaking up with it because it no longer feeds me. And, you know, and business is the same way. My business has to feed me. Otherwise it's gonna drain me. And, you know, we got finite time, and I'm not trying to lose too much of it in a state of drain. So there's that.
So this is, we're coming to the end of time. And so, you know, you've really put a wonderful personal touch on this journey of entrepreneurship, because it is very much about who the person is and how they take on this journey, right?
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I'm sorry for cutting you, just jumping in there. But I think that one of the things, and I talk about this in Build It Boldly, but it's a part of my own personal philosophy of why I started Grant Boulevard. And this goes back to Jaya's question, you know, comment too, reflection too. I started it with a clear sense of purpose. And I think when you're building things with a sense of purpose, it shapes outcomes. It shapes the direction. It shapes the journey. You know, so when you guys are building your businesses, you know, be thinking about what's the purpose, you know, and I think if you can move your purpose beyond solely profit, you will get to something that actually is very nutritious for you and the people that you care about, the things that you care about, the ideas that you care about, the observations that you're making. Your business can do more than just create profit. It has to create profit, but it can do more than just create profit.
Well, I'm looking forward to the book.
I will make sure I'll like this. And here's a forward.
Right. I'm in. Okay. So thank Kimberly, you so much. I hope that you'll remain part of the Close School family.
I would have loved to.
Wonderful. This has just been a delightful, super energy interview. I want to thank Antonis for putting this together. Thank you for your leadership, Antonis. Thank you, Melissa. And a great big, I'm giving you a kiss across Zoom. Thank you, Kimberly. This has just been wonderful. And thank you for sharing your email with my students and colleagues. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Great to meet y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kimberly.